Okay, welcome everyone. If you are in other part of world, good evening. If you are in US, good morning, and wherever you are, just greetings to everyone. Thank you everyone for attending our podcast series on rethinking urban environment. And this is the series one, and Siahi organized this podcast series. So let me brief about Siahi. Those who joined first time our podcast series, Siahi Syahi. Siahi is a society of young agricultural and hydrology scholars of India. So it is a platform which has been built to collaborate, build networks, share research among us, and make more connected actions where we can do in these areas. So one can enjoy the membership of Siahi if he or she is a master, PhD scholar, and a postdoc for all updates and participation. Inclusion and joint actions are Siahi's primary goal. Our objectives are to build a platform for Indian early career researchers up to 5 years of post PhD, to improve communications skill, sharing the technical skills, building networks and collaborations. Knowledge sharing events where young researchers can present their research. So Siahi is a platform which regularly update PhD fellowships, PDF fellowships, funding calls around the globe via members' input. We already advertised 10 to 12 postdoc positions recently. Please check our website. Siahi will continue to provide hands-on training on tools and techniques of emerging technologies ranging from biotech to pure engineering. Siahi will host monthly podcasts and other series to discuss emerging issues by motivating members to join and share platforms. This is a part of the podcast series. Siahi will motivate members to be a mentor of already registered students, to be a part of the book editors, fund collaborations, and many more actions. Siahi also invite PI of Indian labs to support and provide access to members if any internship, project, or any other works can be done under Siahi mentorship. So go ahead, please check our website. We have social media platform, we have Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we have our own website as well. So if you go to website, we have a tab for research, tab for blogs, tab for job openings. You can find exciting things there. If you want to engage with Siahi, we have a blog tab where you can write your own blog, writing your experience on research and activities, what you are doing, and something new in science. So with this word, I will introduce today's speaker. So I cannot summarize in a one or two line about Professor Gupta. Professor Anil Kumar Gupta is a professor at National Institute of Disaster Management in India. He is a sustainability risk management strategist working in the area of disaster management, environment, and climate resilience for more than 25 years with national, subnational, and business administration skills. He steered international and national projects of policy research, planning, and capacity building, and he established new approaches like ECO-DRR. He will talk about those things as well. Integrated mainstreaming, loss and damage focused on climate risk management framework, and many others based on mitigation networks. So he has credit for preparation of national and sectoral disaster management plan. He involved with policymakers, and he also involved with academia as well. So government side, research side, and engaging young people as well. That's what he is doing today, engaging with young students. He's currently a full professor and head of India's National Institute of Disaster Management of Environment and Disaster Risk Management. So he's also program director of Center for Excellence on Climate Resilience and Implementing Priorities, CAPRES. I can talk more about him because list is everlasting. So I will invite, with these words, I will invite Dr. Gupta to say a few greetings word to us. Then we will proceed with our questions. Meanwhile, we will go with questions. I will request everyone, please keep yourself muted unless you are not speaking. So welcome, Dr. Gupta, and then we will start our series.
Namaskar and greetings from New Delhi in India. And first of all, my compliments to this Yahi team and a wonderful initiative of bringing scientists and scientific researchers and all transdisciplinary scholars across and for providing a excellent platform for exchange of ideas, information. I'm very happy that this is also enabling a strong linkage of thought process among countries, because scholars across the countries have uh, joined this network. I could see from your website also. So I am really impressed with this initiative. So my greetings for that also. I welcome all the participants, all the scholars and students, and all those who have joined this uh, program today. Very important topic that has been chosen for the discussion today. And in fact, that is also a title that a highly multidisciplinary. When we talk about urban environment, or when we say city, I think it immediately it brings a flux of the issues and flux of sectors those are involved. So although when we say urban resilience and urban environment or urban development, it appears to be one sector, because in the list of sector, urban appears to be a different sector. But I think there is a long list of sectors that encompass or cross through the urban sector itself. When we look at the urban issues or the urban settings, so I think a very important point I have been flagging at various forums also, that across the globe, when we talk of cities, I think there are different issues that emerges despite of lot of commonalities, because when we talk about expansion of cities or the fast growth of cities in Asia Pacific is not the same as we find in the European countries or other developed countries. The changing boundary of the city in Asia Pacific, and more particularly in the cities of South Asian countries, is very very blurred, very very fast, and very very dynamic. So the very first thing is about the urban settings. The urban settings in Asia Pacific, we find that within the urban areas we can find the villages also. Within the urban areas we can find the areas which we not at all would like to call as part of the city, or the city itself, which is entirely a different type of developmental setting as compared to the developed counterparts. I have seen many of the cities in the developed world also. There, in fact, the historical parts of the cities, uh, which uh, which in fact evolved from the village areas or the slum areas or the underdeveloped areas, are now highly transformed. But even if I talk of New Delhi itself, within the New Delhi, which is one of the biggest metropolitan city of India, we have certain villages which are encompassing within the national capital territory region. Then we have certain areas which are almost some people may think that we have, whether we have really preserved those or what. Even we have national parks also here. So these kind of things are important dimensions when we talk about urban environment and urban development, and more particularly when we discuss about the urban SDGs, because the sustainable development goals, when we think about in a broad sense, and when we and on the other side when we think those in terms of cities, we find that there are certain specific issues that emerge in talking about urban sustainable development goals. And that is the reason I have identified few of the themes which I would like to flag. I know that I cannot put a lot of details in 10 or 15 minutes of deliberation, but taking the advantage of talking to young people who are going to be the future researchers, scientists, technocrats, and going to contribute as a learned citizen in this world, I just taking this opportunity to flag these issues before them for their in-depth thought process. So I find that the past trends of the challenges that cities in India and not only in India but the Southeast Asia have been facing, one of the major challenge has been of climatic disasters. And I think if we look just few years back, we find that the major flooding of Chennai, major flooding of Srinagar, Guwahati, these kind of cities emerged immediately within our mind. In fact, the Mumbai so urban flood issues that started being flagged starting Mumbai in 2005. Still, Mumbai gets flooded, if not fully but partly, every year during the monsoon season. So this is one, but it is not only the flood issue, but we also noted that there are other disasters in contrast. Why I'm saying contrast? Because 2015, the Chennai was flooded to a very severe level, but 2016 it was under drought. It was under serious level of water scarcity challenge, and 2017 also. And then a number of cities in India and also in the neighboring countries are facing the brunt of heat. So now there are a lot of contrast kind of settings of these climatic challenges. We are facing drought, we are facing floods, we are facing heat kind of challenges, and the cities in the coast are facing cyclonic storms also. So what is now important that urban climatology or urban settings of climate, because the phenomenon like urban heat islands, which are particular for the cities, I think these kind of recent studies and understanding are bringing within the meteorology or climatology urban climate science as a separate stream. So I think that is very important aspect. Second aspect, recently we have joined hands with some team of the scientists across the world, where we are also looking at that how do we integrate the scientific domains with the governance domains of water in cities. So urban water governance is emerging one of the even a bigger challenge, because all these disasters that I referred to are associated with lack of water, or the excess of water, or the water in wrong place, wrong time. So we can call it like this. And when we discuss about land uses, in the past studies that we have been carrying out for past 1.5 decades jointly with our international partners, what we noted that urban land use has also undergone drastic change. So not only the depletion of water bodies or the green areas and the excess growth of the built up areas, but on the other hand, we found that the new land uses have also emerged. For example, the urban agriculture is emerging as a new land use. In many of the cities in this region, we found that agriculture is emerging as one of the important land use, because it is also supporting the resilience and sustainability of the city by providing a lot of ecosystem services. So these are the new issues. So now coming to 2 3 more points which I have noted here. Another aspect that I would like to refer to the WHO reference, that more than 24% of the avoidable disease death burdens, means the deaths that can be avoided, are because of the environmental health issues or the environmental quality issues. And within that 24%, I think out of that, 3/4 is in cities. So this water and sanitation issues, waste management issues in cities is a big problem. And in India, we find that we have excellent level of urban sanitation, but on the contrary, we will find a very bad situation of the urban sanitation also. So we have all kind of contrast situation. We have excellent examples, but we have the examples where we have still a lot to improve. So this is the situation not only in India, but cities like Islamabad, cities like Dhaka, cities like Kathmandu. These I find that Colombo has improved a lot in the recent time. So we have good examples, we have the bad examples also. In India, we have this Swachh Bharat mission that we call it a Clean India mission. So I think within that mission, we have really been able to motivate our city administration, and many of the cities are now really able to do excellent. But as a final set of messages that I find here, that cities should need to gear up, and cities should need to come up to address the risk and resilience issues of the present time, looking at the whatever the impacts climate change is causing or whatever impacts the urban sprawl is causing, the issues related with the migrant workers, urban poor, peri-urban issues. But cities should also now start looking at a long-term perspective. I have been speaking just few days before in a meeting, and I spoke that now cities should start looking at 2050 or 2100 scenario, because any kind of resilience, any kind of sustainability cannot be brought in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years time. So when we know that this will be a long term journey, so we need to have a much anticipatory planning also. So this is very important. Then second thing is, currently we have recently uh, launched under this United Nations the UN Decade for Eco Restoration. So that is a message that we have recognized that the ecosystem services have lost. So we have to regain it. And when we talk of regaining it, cities have to play their bit. And basically, that is the issue now globally. There is a huge discussion and there is a lot of focus on urban biodiversity conservation and urban landscape based planning. I think that is a very important recent development. Second thing, what I am seeing that urban settings, urban infrastructure, I would like to call as the future e-cities. I think cities are going to transform very fast to e-cities, where most of the activities would be done by automation, electronics, and the computerized kind of things, digitalization of everything. So how our e-cities are going to look like, how the people in the e-cities are going to behave, and how the things are going to be managed in these so-called e-cities. And when I talk of e-city, basically I also talk about the issues related with green mobility, or the electric vehicles, these kind of things, and then energy efficiency. And last two things, that we are also heading very fast, and this COVID-19 pandemic has in fact compelled us to move very fast towards uh, uh, towards uh, making us too much surrounded by electronic gadgets. So electronic waste, if we are not geared up to address this issue of electronic waste, I think it is one of the bigger challenge we are going to face in near future. That is a short run. I am not talking about the 10 years or 15 years, even 2 years and 5 years down the line, because here also every one of us is having an electronic gadget on our head, and an electronic gadget just before 12 inches of our face. So this is an issue. So finally, I close this deliberation that now let us start thinking towards the cities of 2050, cities of 2100, and let us see that how we are going to have our culture, behavior, ethics, and values also. Because with the change in technology, with the change of urban settings, I think our values and culture and behavior is also going to change. So with this, I stop, and I would be happy to take few questions. Thank you, and over to you, Mr. Jha.
Dear Professor Gupta, thank you. We are extremely pleased to have you. So our format is that we both are moderators. So first of all, let us introduce the two moderators here. I am Prakash Kumar Jha. I am postdoc at Kansas State University, working in the field of sustainable agriculture. And my PhD is from Michigan State University. And my research area is crop modeling and remote sensing. So I am the first moderator, and second moderator is Dr. Pankaj Gupta. Dr. Pankaj Gupta has a PhD from IIT Roorkee, and currently is a postdoc at University of Waterloo. His current research involves in investigating the behavior of hydrocarbon pollutants in peatlands under dynamically fluctuating water tables. And we work as a team in Siahi. So over to Dr. Gupta now. So Dr. Gupta, we have started this podcast series on urban environment. So the question you highlighted, that why we need to think about urban environment, what are the issues in urban areas, and few steps to meet the future goals and mitigation measures as well. So we will discuss more about city-centric disaster risk reduction, because you have expertise in risk reduction policy and natural solutions. So my first question will be for you, like, what is a eco disaster risk reduction? Because we hear a lot about eco disaster risk reduction. So why we have to think more about ecosystem approach for risk management?
I think you flagged the first question. That is one of the theme closest to my heart. And the term that you used, eco DRR, in fact, just to share that this term, which is now very popular globally, this term has been coined by me in 2010 in a meeting in the UN campus in Bonn. And I'm very happy that now there are a good number of scientists and policy persons across the world who are really contributing great to the subject, even much more than me. Uh, this subject is important because what we felt that in disaster management, the entire gamut of disaster management had become the expenditure oriented, whereas we thought that it must be transformed to be made as a investment oriented. And second thing, it has to be more people centric, so that whatever interventions are done, it should have multiple benefits. And the third thing is that what we realize that there is a very close relationship between environment and disasters. I would just quote three major kind of relationship. The very first thing is that the environmental degradation exacerbates disaster risk, that everyone agrees to. Second thing is that the disasters also cause impact on environment, but that is seldom accounted for, because we often refer to the damage to the buildings, damage to people in terms of health or injuries or deaths. But ecosystem damage because of disasters, this the evaluation has started very recently. Jointly with United Nations Environment Program, we have developed a tool for environmental assessment of disasters. And the third thing is that during disasters, usually, and it is certain also that the primary focus is on saving the life of the people. So environmental aspects are often compromised. So, and we all know that when the environmental aspects are compromised, that leads to future disaster risk. So that basically, if we compromise the environmental issues, if we do not care of the ecosystem services, that leads to future risk, and that then it becomes a kind of a vicious cycle kind of thing. So this approach of eco DRR, which not actually replaces other approaches, like civil engineering approaches are required, scientific approaches are required, the governance related issues are required, community related issues are required. So eco DRR basically binds along with these. It doesn't say that you do not employ the engineering based intervention. It says, okay, if we have to address the landslide issue, then you need civil engineering interventions along with planting of certain kind of grasses, so that we have a combination of things, so that even your retaining wall can sustain. So this is basically nutshell these kind of things. And since this forum is about cities, so just I will reflect it again. The Chennai flood, even not only Chennai, but Bengaluru, Chennai, Surat, these are the cities where we know that there has been a huge depletion of wetlands, which are one of the important kind of ecosystems we all know. And depletion of ecosystems because of the unplanned development and filling of those areas with waste and then converting into the real estate, and it's basically that made us lose the natural wetland control facility that these ecosystems provide. And then we are suffering with flooding also, and with the drought also. Yeah. So over to you.
Excellent points. Excellent point, Dr. Gupta. You concluded with city, and we know cities inhabit more than half of world's population by now, and we are expecting that it could cross by 70% by 2050. And so, when we talk about cities, we need to talk about urban and rural linkages, and urban and rural linkages, peri-urban issues. So these are very important issues while dealing with urban disaster and especially climate risk. So in your opinion, what are the key gaps to make a disaster resilient city, and how to deal with such gaps if you have to make a city more resilient?
Yeah, important point. Uh, in cities, basically, the earlier disaster management plans were not exactly looking at the input-output relations with the rural areas. Cities cannot be made sustainable on its own. Cities also provide certain things which goes out from the city, and those are mainly like sewage, waste material, and many of the goods and products and services also. So not only the bad things but good things also. And similarly, cities receive a lot from the counterpart rural areas. But in between the rural areas and urban areas are the peri-urban areas. So that may encompass the urban fringes, or even sometimes the city slum areas, or sometimes the villages which are located very near the cities. So these in-house, like the grain markets, labor markets. These are also in-house, like the tourist spots, ecotourism spots, sometimes the educational facilities, the warehouses, but also the water treatment plant, waste management facilities. So I'm just giving few examples. So I think if we talk of the urban resilience, these are very important aspects of urban resilience, but those are located in the fringes, in the peri-urban areas, not within the city. So I think when we talk of cities, we have to take care of these things. Second thing is that now we have realized that urban areas are facing more of the climatic challenges as compared to other geophysical challenges. So looking to that, how we need to remodel our city. And if we have still some areas which are undergoing development, or we are planning for the expansion or new development areas. So now even in the city, we are talking about the watershed based planning. For quite a long time, watershed was something about the rural areas, about irrigation, agriculture, and all that. But now in cities, we are talking about the urban, watershed based planning, so that whatever drainage is there, it gets the natural kind of a additional redundancy to be provided by the natural gradient. I think that would be an asset. So our drainage should not be like that we ignore the natural gradient, and then we create, then we use machinery and other things to manage our drainage. So these are important things. Second is, within cities we have many type of populations. When I say many types, so one is the city's own population, the people who are permanent resident of city. But every day these cities are also getting lot of floating populations. So many people coming from the villages. So if we look at their identity card or the citizen number, they will not belong to city. They belong to some other areas, but maybe in the time of disaster, they may be located, they may be found within the city. And certainly they are going to be affected by the city, or because of the congestion, the city is going to have a greater challenge. Then most of the cities, since cities in India and cities in South Asia are growing very fast, and when I say growing very fast, it means the huge pace of infrastructure development. And within infrastructure, I think housing and this kind of infrastructure is one of the key infrastructure. And in these sectors, and also in the small scale industry sector, there's a huge population coming from other disaster prone areas, or other areas which are affected by climate change. A migrant population, migrant worker, which move from those areas and settle in cities for want of their job. But in some time, they become the imperative people for city resilience. The city cannot sustain without them, because these are the people having certain kind of skills. These are the people having certain kind of proficiency and competencies to help the certain kind of industries and services in the cities to run. So I think these are very important dimensions, and we have been working on how peri-urban ecosystems are important, and how city resilience can be improved using these kind of approaches. Yeah.
Excellent
So
point.
over to you.
Yeah, excellent point, Dr. Gupta. So you talked about participation of people. So I think I will pass over to Dr. Pankaj Gupta, and he will talk about participation of people and local bodies as well.
And thank you very much, Dr. Jha. And thank you very much, Professor Gupta, for your valuable time with us. With this word, public participation and inclusion, our SIAHI's goal is to improve the inclusion for the sustainable development. And if you remember, Dr. Jha, our last podcast, the inclusion was like a keyword where we discuss a lot. So again, I would like to request Professor Gupta, please enlighten us about, do you think the sustainability, because most of our urban body and the policy frameworks are like in a race for sustainability by leaving or by losing the inclusion. So when I read about the spatial justice, we have to think about the inclusion from each corner of the city. As you mentioned, our city are so diverse. Problems itself are unique in the city. What do you think about the inclusion in the city?
I think very important point that you touched upon. And in general, also when we talk about our journey for SDGs, so I often say that it should not be limited to that particular goal, because and I find that all the goals under SDG, those requires very strong component of inclusion. And inclusion should not be only talking about gender issues or only some particular issue, but it should also talk about the diversity, and that is very important. Yesterday we were talking about the ethnic people, like indigenous people, that what is the role of indigenous people in ecosystem protection and conservation. So similarly in cities also, I think it is very important that we look at that which are the other demographically minority groups or demographically weaker sections. I am not talking of only the religious point of view, but for example, what is the participation of women? In fact, in India, the Honorable Prime Minister of our country has given a 10-point agenda for promoting disaster risk management in our country. And the point 6 is about women leadership. So we are not talking about one step ahead, that not only participation, but we should work on a very strong side of women, and that is providing a strong leadership to the initiative of city resilience. But on the other hand, we have also carried out some work jointly with some of the partners on how the poor people are differently vulnerable. Everyone is vulnerable, but people are differently vulnerable because of, based on their resources, based on their exposure level, based on their type of occupation, the type of housing, the type of amenities and services they have access to. And within those poor people, their children, they are further one layer more vulnerable. So vulnerability of urban children, and within them also, if we look, that vulnerability of urban girl child. So I think there are different layers. I myself have been visiting to these areas, and in fact, during this COVID-19 also, I have been deputed by the government as a part of the central team. And when this migrant population issue was there, and I have been talking to these people, and we are trying to solve this issue. And I found that they had an entirely different kind of setting of the vulnerability. So this is very important point. And during heat also, heat wave incidences also, we found during floods also, we found that different age group, different gender, and different occupation, these have very important role to play in their vulnerability to the impact of various disasters.
Yeah, thank you very much. Another question from registration. So the question from University of California, Merced, Dr. Vivek Gupta, who would like to know what are like a platform available to us to capture like lesson learned from the disasters, previous disaster, and where we, the young people, can contribute to enhance the policy or to make the platforms or urban bodies so motivated and so on.
Very interesting question. I am happy that the young people are looking at their contribution to this. In fact, we jointly with our partners, international partners and national partners, have been trying to create these kind of platforms. And at an IDM also, we are running a journal besides contributing to other journals. So if students have this kind of case studies, they can contribute to our journal. Then I am also a chief editor of a book series under the Springer Nature that is called Disaster Resilience and Green Growth. And basically that the theme of that series has been chosen very after a lot of discussion, that we have to basically these two things go hand in hand. Disaster resilience and green growth cannot be separated. So because climate change is real now, everyone agrees to. So we have to address this also. We have to protect urban environment also, and then we have to reduce the risk of disasters also. Besides this, we have a lot of e-forums. So we have online courses from NIDM also. And recently we had a series of 6 webinars that we organized jointly with the United Nations Environment Program and OCHA. So these kind of programs we are regularly organizing. Any of the student, if they have kind of case study, they can approach me or any of my colleague here. And we have some opportunities of publications. They can join me. They can contribute to my books also or other kind of publications. Recently, we have come up with 3 compendium of case studies. So I think these can provide good opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Surely we will connect with our SIAHI members to the National Institutes of Disaster Management and you for the contributions point of view. Now, I think Dr. Jha, we have to open the session for audience because we do have few questions in chat box.
Yes, so before I invite everyone,
you,
thank you, Dr. Gupta. Before I invite everyone, I would invite Rob. Rob is here. Do you have any remarks, Rob? Because last time we missed you on the podcast series. Do you have any remark on what Professor Gupta said, and then what your thoughts? Please unmute yourself. Are you there, Rob?
Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted. Thanks for having me. This has been a great session. So I'm looking forward to more of these. To tell you the truth, at this point, I'm just taking in everything that's being said. I'm coming from a Canadian perspective. So this is just really interesting to learn from our end, I guess. The perspective of different climates and that. So yeah, I don't have anything to add or ask at this point, but I think it's important that hopefully we can get more of these out to an audience that's more, I guess, in the Western side and in Canada, so we can understand international perspective on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rob. I have a question we have a question from Peter. Peter, if possible, could you please unmute yourself? And if you can switch on your camera, you can ask questions.
Hello,
Peter.
sorry, my camera is having issues,
Okay.
but
no, yeah.
But I'm so happy to be on this platform. I'm actually an MS student hydrology from Lord's University, South Africa. And I'm a Ugandan citizen. So I'm in South Africa for my studies. However, the question I was trying to raise to Professor is that how are they incorporating the urban heat island in far as urban cities concerned? Because from my perspective of my capital city, that is Kampala, when you literally go there, you feel a lot of heat because of the pavement and the structures. So like there is now an urban island, which is imparting a lot of pressure vis-a-vis the impact of climate change. So what I'm inquiring from Prof, how is this done to ensure that cities are also reducing this impact? Thank you very much.
Should I respond to this question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think very important question that is of relevance to, I would say, both the South. So this part of the world also, and many of the cities in Africa also. In India, we started recognizing urban heat island as a serious issue, I would say I think it was 2004 or 2005. The first study was in Bengaluru of urban heat island, and later we realized that many of our cities are facing this challenge because of the increased paving and concretization and the reduction in the open areas. And when we had the devastating heat wave in 2015, then we started a concept of city heat wave action plan. And it is very important to just share that when we talk about city heat action plan, so it also has a side benefit, I would say, that co-benefit, that it addresses the issues related with the cold, the risk of the low temperatures also, because there are also the issues that as if we take example from India, like the city of Simla. So it faces the challenge of the cold wave as well as heat wave. So the both kind of extremes. So we say that temperature extremes, and these extremes, whatever the interventions we are suggesting, we also take a caution that it should not create extreme chilling also during winter. So how do we create buffers? How do we create a natural cooling besides the kind of a synthetic or artificial heat mitigation measures? And beside this, the efficient preparedness and response system to help the people who are affected by heat wave. I would like to refer to the good examples, like I talk of the cities like Chicago also. Like in India also now we are coming with the good models of urban, this green roof concept. So how do we look at this green roof concept, then also urban agriculture, and this watershed based approach, because ultimately the thing, when we talk about heat, the things are also associated with water. So how we retain the moisture level, and this also takes the advantage from improving the rainwater harvesting systems. When I discuss these kind of things, I always say that urban challenges are not only we cannot have a separate plan for heat, we cannot have a separate plan for drought, separate plan for flood. Certainly those will be separate components, but we will have to think of some kind of an integrated plan. That is very important. As I recall my visit to the city of Marseille in France for the World Water Forum, and that is, I think, one of the best example. Now we refer in India also, that can we have that kind of best example in India, that if we do not allow a single drop of water to go waste. So that is a concept now we are working in India also, that under the concept of circular economy or green growth or the green city concept. Certainly it is a long journey, but we are on this journey, and basically that is required for the cities like Kampala also, because we need to see that whatever already built, how do we modify it, and whatever development is still to go, we ensure that the new development ensures that it is heat heat proof, or whatever terminology we use. We should see that it should not add to the urban heat flux. So that is important. Then even transforming from the normal kind of tube lights to then CFL, then now we are going to LED. I think that is also going to help us reducing the heat flux, because that is utilizing lesser amount of energy and providing more lighting for our usage in our homes, our offices, and our shopping complexes. So I think it will require a multi-layer approach. And I'm happy that you referred to Kampala. And I know that some initiatives are going on in Kampala to address the climate resilience. And I'm sure that this heat issue is an implicit part of that climate action plan for Kampala. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. So excellent point when you talk about holistic approach of heat and moisture flux. Like when we plan vegetation, then we need to evapotranspiration flux and then we reduce energy and then heat flux. So this is an interesting topic when we talk about holistic approach of heat and moisture flux to maintain or minimize the urban heat island issue. Next question is from Dr. Avinav Srivastava. He is talking about flood situation in Bihar. If you are here, could you please unmute yourself and ask question?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for giving me this opportunity. I'm audible to everyone?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, sir. Sir, as I asked the question in the chat box, I belong from Bihar, and I saw every year there is a vulnerable situation of flood, especially if we are talking about the rural population. Although they are facing several problems, like when I did my PhD in the arsenic related issue, they are already facing lots of problems. They are literacy issue, they are having a adequate safe water issue, and they are having irrigation issue. At the same time, I think 2 to 3 months, they are having complete flood situation in their irrigation field, in their habitation. They shifted to the highways. So how to manage or how to handle this situation? Because Bihar having 3 or 4 connecting river, having a major river Ganga, and 2 or 3 apart from Ganga, there are 4 and 5 other river system, and they are adjointly Ganga at some place more or less. So how to manage this situation?
Yeah, I think one of the major disaster prone tract
Yes, sir.
of India, and every year it faces a vast area under disaster. And
Yes, sir.
the reasons are also, I think, well known. Because we have the boundary with Nepal. Nepal is our, and then we are riparian to Nepal. So whenever there is excess rainfall in Nepal or excess water in Nepal, then that adds to the Bihar's own water.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that is, I have personally seen those areas. I have been visiting to those areas, and I was very much part of many of the expert committees in Bihar on the flood related issues. What I find that, yes, there is a transboundary cooperation issues and a lot of work is going on. But besides the diplomatic issue, I think there is a strong need to enable a local level understanding for risk solutions. And I think that solution, I would say, if I just 3 points. One is the land use.
Okay.
See, there are certain rivers and there are certain tributaries and rivulets like which are known as historically notorious.
Sir, like Kosi.
Yeah, and even the check dams and other kind of civil engineering measures also are always there is some partial success, not full success. So realizing
Yes,
the nature of rivers, basically, our land use should have control. In India, we had a framework of floodplain zoning, but some or other way, we find that on ground, it is still has to be implemented. And it is not only the government that can implement, but basically it need to be integrated with the village level and taluka level planning. So that is very important. So sub-district level, and people have to be brought on board. Second thing is that the effective water management. So whatever flood water comes, a part of that is basically, if we consider that a part of that is a menace, but a part of that is a resource also. But since we are not able to restore that water, it becomes a serious challenge. And then in the subsequent season, we are facing drought. So that is the second aspect. And the third aspect is that as the same thing as I was referring to the city floods, that the loss of natural containments locations are natural buffers. So many of the low-lying areas are now lost. And we are occupying more and more land. So I would refer here that I think we need to have a long-term strategy, but bringing people on board. There was a externally funded project. Some agencies were implementing in Bihar. I was also a part of that. The title was Road to Resilience. And there we in fact work with some of the village based institutions and community-based organizations for rejuvenating the local wetlands and local lakes and ponds. And we saw that how this rejuvenation of these local lakes and ponds contributed to reducing the vulnerability of the people in terms of social and economic dimensions, but also reduce the risk of flooding because it provided additional flood water assimilation facilities. So I think that is also important. But I would again come to this, that the land use issue and the design of infrastructure. Okay, if I say that the poor people have no choice, they have to occupy the low-lying area. But I have seen that even sometimes the government buildings are sometimes the building of the people who are affluent, who can have better designs, who can afford better designs and engineering designs. Their houses are located in these areas and have not built to the flood resilient designs. So I think these are 2-3 important points I would like to refer to. And government of Bihar has come up with this model of flood resilient buildings also. But I think there's a lot to do to popularize these models. Yeah. So I would stop here on this question. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Srivastava and Dr. Gupta, for such a nice answer. I think
Dr. Jha,
Dr. Gupta, yeah, Dr. Pankaj Gupta is a
I would like to add few things here to answer Abhinav's question. Professor Gupta and all of you would be happy to know about the Honorable Minister, Water Resource Department, Sri Sanjay Kumar Jha, and the respected Secretary, Sanjeev Hans. They do have like a mission mode for the flood management. And that's why we do have like 2 modeling center over there. First is mathematical modeling center in Patna, and second is physical modeling center in Supaul. And likely they do have like flood forecasting systems and a full-fledged flood forecasting system by integrating the GIS remote sensing. And I was invited last week to a webinar, and the webinar's topic and the vision was fantastic, to revisit the flood situation and irrigation improvement in Bihar. So I think government of Bihar and all the chief engineers, they are looking for long-term solutions. If any of you have like anything, any point, you may text them directly, and you will be happy to see the progress over there. But yes, there is a mission mode, and they are working very well with these situations over there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you, sir.
Siahi is very proud to say that 2 of us are part of Bihar government flood management program. So we are in touch with ministry and engineers as well. So thank you, Dr. Srivastava. Last question we'll take from Pandu N. Pandu N, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, sir. I'm Pandu Shetty from NIT Surat. Actually, I had a plan when there is a flood from the river in the city. Maybe we can divert some amount of water from a bypass channel around the city, and maybe we can think in that regard. Maybe we can reduce the flow in the main channel in the river inside the city.
Yeah.
So will that work? Maybe.
Yes. Creating levees is one of the historically known approach. And since you are from NIT Surat had also faced major flooding in 2006.
Yes.
Yeah, and one of your Professor Mistry. Yeah.
Actually, NIT Surathkal, Karnataka.
Okay, you are from Karnataka. Okay, so NIT Surathkal is also in MOU with us. They work with our institute also. Yeah, your institute. Yeah. So yes, it is a well-known approach, and even some of the cities have a very innovative kind of approach. I would like to refer about the Kuala Lumpur model. Like some of you must be aware that how a drain in the non-rainy times can serve as a transport facility, and then so these kind of alternative models where you can create redundancy. So I think in cities, redundancy is a very important aspect for anything. So for the storm water drainage also, yeah. So that can really work. And for rivers also, the cities which are located near the rivers, if we can reduce the flow of water and if we can provide alternative channels, even in India, if we look at Haridwar, so that is one of the models. So in many of the cities in India, we find these kind of models. Yeah. Thank you.
Another example from the Bangkok, they do have like an emergency pathway to manage the city flood over there.
Yes.
Yeah, but the issue related to the bypass channel in like a state like Bihar is the population and overcrowded settlements over there. So we cannot like go for horizontal expansion by putting something like that. But it is not like a hardened rule. Definitely, if any feasibility, we will like happy to incorporate in the near future.
We'll have to have a mixed approach, basically. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much.
So with an interest of time, I would go for last question. So the last question is that while we are talking, yesterday IPCC released its 6th report yesterday, August 9. And
yes,
and the report is horrendous. And we need to talk about that. So my last question is on the climate change, global warming. So I will quote the IPCC verbatim, what they say. Global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius will be exceeded during the 21st century unless deep reduction in CO2 and other greenhouse gas emission occur in the coming decades. They are talking about decades. We have to minimize in decades. So for urban planning, what are the natural climatic solutions we will think on the mitigation measure side?
I think I will very brief on this. And again, I would reiterate the integrated risk management approach, because the kind of uncertainties we are going to have will certainly pose new challenges to even our projections and forecasting systems. So if we only prepare for flood and we have water scarcity, it will not work. If we only prepare for heat and if we have chilling in the winters, it will not work. So I think we need to prepare for multi-hazard scenario. And then
yes.
as I told, that we do not have any control. We are moving very fast on automation, e-based system. So the cities are certainly going to transform. Maybe just after a few years only, these kind of podcasts and webinars are being organized with our robo colleagues. Maybe some of us are speakers and some of the robots are speakers. So I think the things are going to transform very, very soon. So we need to prepare for that. And that is the reason, again, I would reiterate that cities in 2050 and cities to 2100, looking at the climatic scenario, looking at the socio and demographic scenario, so looking at these kind of electronic and other technological advancement that we are going to have. I was just talking to my colleagues that maybe after 10 years or so, or after 15 years or so, somebody will be saying that we are going to have 3 delegates from Mars or something like that. So I think how the entire society and particularly the urban societies are going to adapt to this long term, but certainly the word I would use, the disruptive changes in this urban social settings. So thank you very much. I think I would close here. Yeah.
Excellent point. So before we conclude, I would say those questions which are not answered, we will email those questions to Professor Gupta, and then you will get answers for those questions. Because of interest of time, we will conclude this session. Please do visit our website. You will get a lot of updates on upcoming events, podcast, or any training workshop, or any collaboration for chapters or publications. Please do visit our website. You can get updates there. If you are a member, you will get updates through email. If you are not a member, please do join our membership. It's free, completely free. You will get everything without any charge. So please do visit our website and join us. And thank you for everyone. Those who are in India, good night to everyone, and then good day to other part of the world. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, we'll talk later. Thank you very much. Good night. Take care.